Hey y'all, welcome to Where is My Hairbrush? I'm Eliza,
And I'm Gabrielle.
and we're here to talk about Veggietales.
That's right.
Today we are talking about episode 6, The Toy That Saved Christmas, which is pretty timely. We're coming up on Christmas here shortly. It's a little
hmm
bit before Thanksgiving, so that's
But just
not,
barely.
well,
It's Christmas music season for me.
disagree. I wait until after Thanksgiving. I, in fact, have a Thanksgiving playlist. It's not very long, it's not very good, but it does exist.
I was going to say, what's on it? You'll have to
Um,
share that with me later.
yeah, it's a lot of songs about food and
Yep, yep,
thankfulness.
yep.
And then there's a couple of line dances where you're supposed to
Oh.
act like a turkey.
Oh, well, that's exciting. I have a playlist of Christmas music, but it's like bluegrass. So it makes me feel like it's still fall, but it's Christmas. And that's what I've been listening to. But also, we've been doing Christmas music at church for the last 6 weeks, so I didn't really have a choice.
Gross. We start
It's
with work
out
and
of
it's
my
like,
hands.
oh my word. Sometimes, one last thing on this. Places started putting out Christmas decor in September.
That's just unacceptable.
It made me so mad. It made me want to just not go in Sam's or whatever.
Yeah,
Because,
boycott.
yeah, and just make them ship everything to me. But alas, I'm not willing to spend that kind of money in order to feel better about how people treat Christmas.
Yep.
Um,
Hey, but that's what the episode's about.
that's right. It is. Gabrielle, did you remember which silly song went with this episode?
Oh, I sure did. As soon as I looked up what episode we were doing today, I was like, oh, yeah, I know this silly song because it's my favorite part of the episode.
It's really good. I sing it every Christmas. It's on my Christmas playlist.
That's
It's the
excellent.
Santa, could that be him? And then
To be the
somehow
one who brings presents to a cucumber like me.
a
There's
good
good harmonies in
cucumber
this
like
song.
me. Yeah, it's a good one.
I I should we talk about the silly song right this moment because I have lots of thoughts about it.
Yeah, we can do that. Sounds good.
Okay, my favorite part of the silly song, I have several favorite parts. One of them is that at the top of the shot, you can see that there's a box of like baking powder tied
Mm-hmm.
to a stick that they're shaking over the whole scene to make it look like snow outside.
Mm-hmm.
Love
Mm-hmm.
that detail. And then my other favorite memory from this whole entire episode is that this episode taught me what the IRS was. Because as like you don't get that joke as a kid that's clearly there for adults.
Mm-hmm.
But after enough times of watching it, I had to go ask an adult, what is the IRS and why is Larry so rude to
Yeah.
this one character when he's so nice to the bank robber and the Viking, but he
Mm-hmm.
shuts the door in the face of the guy who's from the IRS. So I learned from a young age thanks to Veggietales.
And you know why now. You know
I
why.
do know why.
An endless paperwork trail that no one wants to go down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I love that his visitors are a bank robber, a Viking, and someone from the IRS. It's very random.
It's so
Seemingly
random.
there's no rhyme, no reason. And the bank robber like has knocked on his door, assuming he's a bank, I guess, and he's like, "I'm here to steal all your
I'm here to
dimes and
rob your
nickels."
bank.
And Larry's like, "But I'm not a bank. I'm a Larry."
I'm just a good cucumber.
That's right.
And then
Um,
the Viking comes asking for his cattle or something.
he's like, "I'm going to steal your land, your cattle, your chickens, and like typical Viking stuff. Like, this is now mine." And I'm like, I own this now, and you don't. Bye bye. And he was like, "Well, I don't have any cattle, but I
But
have
I
this
have a
cookie."
cookie. It's so funny. And at
It's
the end,
hilarious.
the tax collector or the IRA agent comes back at the end because there's one extra cookie because Santa didn't eat any of the cookies that Larry baked for him, which Bob Santa, that's kind of rude. Larry
Mm-hmm.
sang a whole song about saving a cookie for you and you didn't even eat any. But
True.
there was a cookie left, and the IRA person comes and he says, "Did you claim that?"
Yep.
And Larry just shakes his head no very sadly.
And then the IRS person steals it and goes
Yep.
away.
So good.
Insane. It's a really good one. It's
Mm.
so it's very adult humor-esque.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I found it nearly as funny as a kid as I do as an adult. It's good. It's good stuff.
It also reminds me, I liked it a lot as a kid, and I think it's because the whole thing is meant to look like some people are just putting on a Christmas play kind of thing. Like, it's like you're doing it in your backyard kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I was the cousin who always forced all the other cousins to participate in a nativity scene or some sort of play. I would type up scripts and email them to their parents ahead of time, and I expected everyone to show up knowing their lines. So I just appreciated the whole like the setting of the scene with the snow and the decorations, and they put up a makeshift door. It's just like, and Bob's uh, very clearly tied on beard. So good.
I'm imagining you with like your little like script and like a pencil or something and being like, tapping your pencil on the script being like, okay, it's time
Yeah.
to get to work.
Yeah. Listen, you should you should talk to my mother about it sometime. I caused a lot of problems as a child. And and people didn't believe me when I said I wanted to be a music teacher. And I think back on that, I'm like, how did you not see this in my future? I forced people to do plays with me when I was 7.
Maybe like they were thinking that it sounds like you didn't necessarily approach your cousins with a ton of patience, but with a lot of expectation.
Oh
So
yeah.
maybe they were like, children will drive her nuts because
Yeah.
they've always driven her nuts.
That's so true.
Yeah.
There were lots of tears sometimes.
Oh no, over the Christmas
Usually
play?
mine because nobody had
Oh,
learned their lines and I was
no.
very upset by that.
Oh, it's the worst part of any group project is when you
Yeah.
do all of your parts and you like like, even if you over exceed expectations kind of thing, and then the people around you don't even do their like little piece that they were meant to. Oh,
Right.
it's so tough.
It's the worst.
What a
Yeah.
hard lesson to learn as such a young
I
Gabrielle.
know, especially for a homeschooler. Like I was homeschooled and I
Yeah.
still learned that lesson. What does that say about people?
All you wanted to do was have a little Christmas play and for
Yeah.
everyone to be as excited about it as you were.
One other tidbit about my Christmas plays was that whichever cousin I was the most upset with that year, I made them be the donkey. And somebody sat on them. I made them carry
Yeah.
people. And I was naturally always the angel Gabriel. And no one could contest the fact that I should have that role because it's my name. So
I
I always got to be the
really
angel and wear a pretty angel costume. And then I'd be like, "You're the donkey because you made
did
me mad last time."
did no one just say no? Like there's no way.
At some point, my oldest cousin said no. And I threw a tantrum. And then her parents made her do it so that I wouldn't be so upset. But that was the last year. I don't know how old I was. I don't know if I was like 8 or 9 at that point. But that was the last time we did it.
That's so funny. Being the youngest of almost all of my cousins, there's no shot that any of them would have done this for me. They'd be like, "No, we're not doing that. It's not
Yeah,
happening."
I was the fourth oldest of 12 of us who were about the same age. So I was pretty close to the top enough that they listened. There were enough smaller children.
I didn't even. Sometimes I would propose board games for board game night at Christmas, and
Uh-huh.
my vote only counted for like half of one instead of one whole one because I was so young.
It was your idea and you only got half a vote.
Yeah, well, everyone came with ideas. We had a bunch of board
Oh,
games, so we would all vote on which one we wanted to do, and I would only get half a vote because I was so young.
that is so sad.
Yeah, and usually all like my sisters wanted to play these games that required a lot of knowledge or like really
Mm-hmm.
good reasoning skills, like
Yep.
cranium or something like that.
Yep.
And I was like 9 and not ready to play cranium. So
Right.
I was putting out like phase 10 or something like that. And
Yeah.
they were like, no, veto, we're playing cranium.
Wow.
Wow. It just
Poor
goes to
little
show.
lizard.
Little lizard, bullied from a young age. It builds character. I've had a lot of character building along the way.
And that's the true meaning of Christmas, everybody. Being bullied by your relatives at a young age.
So that you could have lots of character in your later years.
Yep.
Okay, Gabrielle, how did you remember this episode other than the silly song?
I really only remembered um that there was the sledding scene,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually had them mixed up. I just remember Bob and Larry sledding and then the penguins on their little sleds. And
Mm.
I remember it being very dramatic. And I think I remember that the bridge was out. Like I
Mm-hmm.
knew that they were sledding and that it was a tense situation.
Yes.
And I remembered the silly song. And I remembered my favorite quote. And I want you to know that I typed this before I watched it. And then I checked it and I was exactly right. And it's the Mousetrap quote, which I think was,
No.
I know, I'm going to steal it because I say this sometimes because Bob he falls off the sled. And he's like, Mousetrap. I wanted to play Mousetrap. You roll your dice, you move your mice, nobody gets hurt. It's,
It's very sweet. It's very simple.
yes.
It's very like it's giving the responsible one in the group,
Yes.
like
After everything has gone wrong.
yes, when you like could prophesy that things were gonna go wrong and everyone
Yep.
else is like, "No, you're so boring, such a stick in the mud." And then you get
Right.
talked into doing the thing and then you're the one
Yes.
that gets injured and they're like, "Well, it wasn't a problem for us," and you're like,
Right.
"Mousetrap."
All the time, like because my husband loves to play all of his various dice rolling games. Anytime somebody says you roll your dice, like if they're playing magic at our house, I'm like, you roll your dice, you move your mice, nobody gets hurt. And everyone looks at me like I'm insane. And then
Well,
I shrug and I'd never explain.
never out of, well, if you never explain, it's just out of context. It's like
It's not my fault they're not cultured.
they're thinking that you have like these little pet mice out like in your closet or something. You're making like a mice village and like
To be fair, I would do that. I like mice a lot.
it's very flowers for Algernon of you.
Yeah.
What a downer. Sorry. Well,
So, so what did you remember from this episode?
what did I remember? I remember the toy. I did not remember he had a saw for a hand. Somehow
It's
that just
so weird.
escaped my memory, but I remember there was a toy, and that Mr. Nezzer was the bad guy again. I did not remember that it was not the same Mr. Nezzer from
I didn't
the
either.
Chocolate Factory. I didn't realize it was his brother. That was obviously
Yeah. That was a
unimportant
new
to me.
fact for me. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was like, wow, why do we care?
yeah.
Just because like we have all these other characters that are just the same character every time. Like, why did they bother giving him a different name? I thought that was random.
Well, maybe they thought that not one man could have all the riches of the veggie universe.
Mm,
They needed the brothers to share it. Um,
hmm.
and then it also added like a little bit of character to his villainy, if you will.
That's true.
Like,
That's true.
he was in competition with his brother. He couldn't let his
Yep.
brother be the richest one in the family, yada, yada, yada. Um, I also remembered the ending scene with like them getting on this like shoot thing with the
Hmm.
sled. And then Larry saying, I remember Larry said something dumb, and that's why they went down the sled. I just didn't remember what he had
Poor
said.
Larry.
He was like, "Oh, well, don't send us to like Campersville or something. The bridge is out." And
Um,
Mr. Nezzer was like, "What a great idea!" And then
Somebody says, way to go,
that's right.
really softly.
And so then they get sent down the one that had been taped off specifically because the bridge was out, and the reason it stuck in my memory is because it reminded me of the scene from Emperor's New Groove where it's like the pull the lever, croc, wrong
Wrong
lever.
lever.
Why do we even have that lever? Like that.
I I was that's funny that you say that it reminded you of that because I was getting like Santa Claus the movie
Mm,
vibes from the whole Toy Story thing, Toy Story, the Toy Factory thing.
Hmm.
Like Mr. Nezza reminded me of like what's Tim Allen's name in that movie? Scott
Scott
Calvin.
Calvin, yeah.
You remind me of Scott Calvin at the beginning of the Santa Claus.
When he's grumpy and just wants to make money for Christmas.
Yeah, by
Yeah,
selling toys that
selling
aren't
lots of toys.
that great.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's a similar concept. It's also what was used in that episode of Community where they're all in like Abed's trippy claymation
Oh, that
experience.
episode's weird.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then they're on this like journey to find the true meaning of Christmas and like
That's right.
yeah.
I think I blocked that episode out. It creeps me out a little bit.
It's a little creepy. It's like Christmas meets Charlie and the Chocolate Factory,
Yes,
kind of interesting.
very strange.
Um you said your favorite quote from the episode.
What's
I
your
will
favorite
now
quote?
share mine. I sent it to Gabrielle earlier for exact
Hmm.
requotation. Okay, so we have the toy with the buzzsaw for a hand, and one of these toys is getting made in the factory. Um, he becomes somewhat sentient, and he's like,
Yes,
maybe the true meaning of Christmas isn't about toys.
and
Maybe
nobody
it's
questions
something
this.
else. Yeah. But one of the advertisements for this toy was um, it's brand new, it's super cool, yada yada yada, and it comes with a fully functioning buzz saw, exactly what every kid wants, um, which is so of the time. Like
I was gonna say that's so 90s.
there were so many toys coming out that just didn't belong in the hands of children, but
Right.
it was advertised like what every kid wants.
Like it reminds me of what were those little ovens that
Easy bake
everybody
ovens.
had? Yeah, like it was an oven. Why did I have that when I was 6? That doesn't seem safe.
Yeah, I ate many an undercooked pancake out of my Easy Bake oven.
Mm, we would make
That's
cookies.
oh, did they turn out well?
I don't remember, to
Well,
be honest.
I remember being disappointed.
Yeah, I don't think they were good.
And then I think I kept asking myself, why am I using this and not the real oven?
Right. This is what every kid wants.
Exactly, but every kid wanted it. Exactly. Um, so we kind of brushed over what this episode, like the
Yeah,
core
the
plot.
actual plot.
So let's just take a moment to go through and give that for the
Hmm.
people who haven't watched it today.
Essentially, Mr. Nezer has a toy factory and he has a broadcasting station and he uses this to release commercials about how everybody has to have his toy or you'll have a terrible Christmas. And there's a line where he's like, Billy has more toys than you. And then the kids are going to the parents like, Billy has more toys than me. And they're like, who's Billy? I don't know, but he's got more toys. Like they're all being super whiny and
Hmm.
really grouchy because suddenly they want this toy
Hmm.
because of the manipulative marketing going on. And then, like Liza said, one of the Buzzsaw toys, Buzzsaw Louie's, becomes. Do you think that's a play on Buzz Lightyear?
Possibly,
And that's why they're all in the boxes, just like that scene from Toy Story 2.
maybe
It's almost exactly the same scene where Buzz
falls off the
like
shelf. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
falls
yeah.
off the shelf in his box.
Oh, probably then. Yeah, that makes sense. They
That
also
just now occurred to me.
they also have a feature where if you press their nose, the Buzzsaw Louis,
Mm,
they'll say, "The true meaning of Christmas is more toys," or something like that.
to infinity and beyond. Just
But
kidding. He doesn't say that.
yeah, he just like that's meant to be
I'm
their.
convinced it's a Buzz Lightyear reference now.
I think you're right. I think it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, but this one Buzzsaw Louie who is sentient escapes the factory, and then it cuts to Bob, Larry, and Junior sledding down a hill, And then they see that this bridge is out to this other town that I can't remember the name of. And they find the sentient buzzsaw Louie laying in the snow. And they're like, it's a buzzsaw Louie. And then he, instead of saying just his normal phrases when you push his nose, he says, that's not what the true meaning of Christmas is about at all, or something. And then they're just talking to this toy, and nobody thinks this is shocking. The thing that they think is shocking is that he's disagreeing with his own phrases, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is funny. And then they go on a mission to tell everybody, or no, sorry, first they go to Grandpa George's house.
Got to.
This
He
whole
knows all.
story, this whole story is being told by a grandfather to his granddaughter. We didn't say that at the beginning. I forgot it. So they go to Grandpa George and they ask him, what is the true meaning of Christmas? And he reads them the Bible story from Luke 2 of the birth of Jesus. And I thought this was really interesting, Eliza. We can talk about this more later, but this is I think, the first time that they say Jesus in all of Veggietales.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I wrote that down, but then I didn't fact check myself. But I'm pretty sure this is the first time they like explicitly say Jesus, and then they kind of share the gospel because then he reads John 3:16 too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other episodes have been more Old Testament dense, and
Mhm.
parable dense, but this is the first episode to talk about Jesus. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
So they take this newfound knowledge. I love this. They find out like, oh, this is supposed to be about the birth of Jesus and how God loves us. That's the point of Christmas. And their immediate reaction is, we have to tell everybody. We can't let anybody go without knowing this for Christmas. So their grand plan, Junior's grand plan, let's be specific. Bob does not think this is a good idea. Um, is to break into Mr. Nezer's broadcasting studio and broadcast like a
Anti infomercial.
yes, I don't have a word for that. Um, that no, we shouldn't buy more toys. We should be focusing on loving each other because God loves us, and that's why we have Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It's really sweet.
it's very sweet. And then Grandpa George, as he's telling the story, we go back to him talking to his granddaughter, and his granddaughter will be like, in the beginning, he was like, "That's not the meaning of Christmas." And Grandpa George says, "Well, I know that, and you
Mm-hmm.
know that." And then at
Mm-hmm.
the end, she's like, "Oh, what a great story!" And he's like, "Isn't
Yeah.
it? No, it's time for bed." It's very sweet. Um, it's very reminiscent of just you know quality grandfather granddaughter time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, I I love Bob's presence in this episode throughout. He
Yes.
is always careful, always sort of like the Debbie Downer of any of the ideas. Always practical in his
Mm-hmm.
thinking, and it's very like Bob and Larry are like Mary and Martha. Except
Yeah, in a
Bob
lot
is
of ways.
Martha and Larry is
Yes.
Mary.
Yes. Yes.
It's very sweet. Very sweet. Um, the Bible stories that are used in this episode are from Luke 2 and John 3:16, telling the story of Jesus being born and like the Christmas story as we know it, how,
Mm-hmm.
the angel Gabriel came to Mary and Mary was going to have a baby and it's the thing we hear every year around Christmas time. But with a twist on how that is super applicable in American culture because it can be really easy in the Christmas season to get caught up in all
Yes.
the gift giving and stuff like that and
Mm-hmm.
to not take time to just spend time with Jesus. And there's also
Yeah.
lots of like aggressive sort of advertising for people to either uh, go hard in the paint on the whole buying gifts and giving gifts
Mm-hmm.
and to really gear you towards wanting things from people at Christmas time. And then there's sort of the opposite where people are like aggressively going, Jesus is the reason for the season. Um, and like doing it almost with an angry air
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Like, heaven forbid you say happy holidays to that person.
Yeah.
They will lose their mind
Yeah, yeah.
and tell you probably that you're a heathen.
Yeah.
Um, Also in American culture, we are kind of obsessed with like Santa.
Mm,
And I don't know that I realized how much that's true until we had our exchange student from Italy last year. And they have the concept of Santa, and they do get a gift from Santa, but it's not on Christmas. It's actually before Christmas, and it's not really a big deal. Like, it's something usually really small.
mm-hmm.
So the fact that like there's all these movies about Santa Claus was very strange to her. And then our Brazilian exchange student who we have right now, they do not make a big to do about Christmas like we do. Like, they celebrate it, but it's just kind of like an
A more
just
normal
another
holiday.
holiday that
Yeah.
like you don't go to school that day and you eat dinner with your family. It's not this whole season. So yeah, I really Americans,
We
well,
love to
North
celebrate.
Americans, we make this big deal about it. And then there's countries like Mexico that celebrate for longer than we do. Like, they keep it going all through Epiphany. So it's not like it's just the United States, but we do very much commercialize Christmas. And I wonder if that was if it's worse now or if it was worse in the 90s or if it's just the same amount of this idea that Christmas is just about gifts. I don't know.
I think it's probably a perennial problem
Mm-hmm.
for our country. I don't think it's
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it's gotten worse since the 90s, and I also don't know that it's gotten better. Definitely less kids watching stuff with advertisements these days, and less
Right.
adults too. But I do think we are just as what's the word when you love stuff?
Obsessed,
Well, there's a specific word I'm thinking of.
infatuated,
Like
enamored.
it's like specifically for feeling that way towards stuff though.
Oh,
Um
hoarders.
materialistic.
Oh.
It's pretty close though. I think as a people here we tend to be pretty materialistic. Um Initially it started as a way of like
Mm-hmm.
wanting to show status and stuff, but now I think we just
We have stuff for no reason.
yeah.
It's just trash. And I'm saying that for myself. Like, right now, we're trying to have a yard sale tomorrow. We're planning on it
Whoa,
if it
good for
doesn't
you.
rain. Thank you. And as I'm like pulling stuff that I want to get rid of, I'm like, why do I have this?
Mhm.
Like, where did it come from?
Mhm.
Why is it still here? Like, just so much of this stuff is like, I don't need to save this. Why did I buy it in the first place? Or like, actually, a lot of the time somebody gave it to me, or like it's my husband's, and I'm just like, why do we have so many things? We don't need all these things.
Yeah. 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 And some of it's truly just like stuff you get because at the time you're like, this will be really cool and I really enjoy
Mm-hmm.
using it. And you
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it for like 2 weeks and then it goes to the wayside.
Right. Like, we have, for example, a like an electric massage thing for your back or whatever
Hmm.
that my I think my brother-in-law gave us because they bought it and then they used it twice. And they're like, yeah, we don't really want this. And so then somehow we ended up with it when they moved. But it's stuff like that. It's like we buy random garbage because some ad online told us to do it.
Hmm.
It's a
Hmm.
problem.
Yeah. And the thing that I found the most shocking watching as an adult for this episode is just how um, easily believing and manipulated the community was
Mm-hmm.
by the advertisements.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a little bit. stretch, but I'm not sure that it
But I
was.
don't think it is. That's the
Yeah.
crazy part.
How wild is that? They were like
I,
immediately, like they watch this and the kids are
yeah.
immediately like, "Oh, my life is so bad and I don't have that many things and
Mm-hmm.
like Billy is the worst because he has more things and Billy's some random
Mm-hmm.
made up kid." Like they're
Mm-hmm.
really easily manipulated. And then but it worked in the opposite too that when uh the
When
toy
Junior
and
and yeah.
Junior made their announcement, they were like, "Oh, Jesus is what this is about. It's not about making sure you have all the toys in the world and making sure you have
Mm-hmm.
more toys than the anonymous Billy."
Right.
It's um it's really interesting because I think we are somewhat numb to ads now to where
Yeah.
like ads have very little meaning. There's also so much misinformation everywhere.
And I don't think in the when we were growing up, all of us saw the same ads
Mhm.
because there were only so many channels
Mhm.
and there were only so many ads. But now there's not that like mass, oh, we all want an easy bake oven or we all want this, whatever,
Mhm.
because we're not all consuming the same content. So I don't think these days it's so true for children, but I do think it's like that for adults with things like misinformation and in the news. Like the whole community can be like, oh, this happened. And it's like, that didn't really happen. The news just said that, but it
Mhm.
wasn't true. But people don't dig any deeper. They just take things at face value so often.
Mhm. Just the same as you have to do your due diligence when you see an ad for like some sort of product, they have to go and
Mm-hmm.
research reviews on
Mm-hmm.
it, like people who've actually already bought it. It can tell you whether or not it's junk or not.
Right.
The same is true for pretty much anything you see on
Right. I
television.
with my middle school students last week, we memorized the verse that says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own and my own know me. And it talks about in that passage how like the sheep know their master's voice and that's who they respond to. And then
Mhm.
we were talking about how, well, how do you know Jesus's voice
Mhm.
among all this chaos if you aren't regularly studying what he said?
Mhm.
And I was just reflecting on that and being like, that's an excellent point. Like, how do we as adults know how to discern what is true and what's not? Because we can't always look at reviews for everything in life.
Yeah.
Sometimes those reviews are the Bible, and like, what
Mhm.
does the Bible say about this versus what's culture saying about it or society?
Mhm. One of the pastors that I really respect and listen to his podcast, he'll talk sometimes about like his relationship with scripture and he'll talk about how when he's going through periods where he hasn't been as um, vigilant about being
Mm-hmm.
in scripture, he'll notice it in his life and then he'll know that he needs to start reading the scripture over himself. And that's how he
Mm-hmm.
says it too. And he's like he'll talk about how sometimes he just needs to read something that's fact over like
Mm-hmm.
to himself and over himself so that he can reset his like soul and stuff back towards what God has intended for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that to read something that's fact because there's so little things these days that we can take as fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
For
that's
sure.
really cool.
Um, the scripture for this episode, I don't think was meant to be like portrayed in the episode. So it wasn't like
No.
a
It was,
direct
yeah.
portrayal
It
of
was just
the
like a moral story.
yes.
Hmm.
This it's definitely a moral story about like the condition of your heart at Christmas time when you're being
Right.
bombarded with um, people giving you gifts or you giving other people gifts and spending money and all those kinds of things. And just really being vigilant about loving Jesus more than you love stuff
Stuff.
or yourself
Mm-hmm.
in those
Mm-hmm.
periods. Um, how this is connected to my adult life. What a great question. It can, I think as an adult, I get hit with this more often because as an adult, I have more access to money than I ever did as a kid.
Right.
Um, like my parents were sort of on the lower middle class section, and they saved a ton. So the money that was out and about to be spent on things was rather limited.
Mm-hmm.
And we only really got gifts like at our birthdays, Christmas, and Easter.
Mm-hmm.
So I did get pretty accustomed to getting a nice gift at Christmas, but I didn't have the luxury of being materialistic because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the access to the money to be
Right.
materialistic.
Right.
As an adult, I do have access, um, for the time being. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm,
Mm-hmm.
I've been blessed enough to be able to buy stuff and not have to worry about how it's going to reflect my budget. You know,
Yep.
smaller stuff. Obviously, I'm not going to go out and buy a boat today. You know, but like
Right.
smaller things, clothes, beauty products, like littler things that you buy for yourself as like a little treat, you know?
Right. Right.
um and it calls my name more in adulthood.
Yeah.
Like when I'm out shopping or whatever, or just like browsing the internet, doesn't matter. Just like little things that would make life a little bit easier or make my home more aesthetic, or like, little pieces of clothing that would be nice to add to the wardrobes for some variety, like anything like that. It speaks to me a lot more as an adult,
Yeah.
and it requires me more to say no to stuff because I don't
Mm-hmm.
have that protection of my parents to say no for me.
Yeah. 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 Thanks for sharing that. Um, I think specifically the part of the story where it's like relating to Christmas, my family stopped doing big presents and bunches of presents when we turned 12. That was just kind of our rule. So the materialistic part isn't as applicable to me, I feel like, when we're talking about Christmas. But for me, as a teacher who's always had this certain amount of time off at Christmas break, and always I have always lived in another state from my family as an adult. And so Christmas turns into like a time commitment struggle for me
Mm-hmm.
where I'm like, oh, I got to see this person and do this thing and go to this place. And like, I quickly stopped thinking about why are we here celebrating? Like, just today,
Mm-hmm.
I was writing down all the stuff I want to do during Christmas break when I'm home.
Mm-hmm.
And um, zero of the things I wrote down, no. One thing that I wrote down revolves around loving my family, thinking about Jesus and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
the rest is just running around like a crazy person, which is what I'm going to do. But maybe I can run around like a crazy person who loves Jesus
Yeah.
instead of being stressed. So
Sure.
I think that's my takeaway today.
Yeah.
The
It's a
reason for
really
the
beautiful
season.
thing. We're doing a little reset before the season really kicks
I
in.
know
A
this was good
little
timing.
preemptive thinking.
Mm-hmm. Very
Well,
timely.
Gabrielle, do you have any closing thoughts?
Not today.
Wow, how insightful of you. Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. If you'd like, you can contact us at where'smyhairbrushpodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, remember,
God made you special.
and he loves you very much. Bye.
Bye.